Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next webinar of Cybiant. It's my great pleasure today to talk to you about the new ITIL V framework. And what we're going to do in this webinar today is that we're going to provide you with an introduction to some of the key concepts. Obviously, the whole new version of ITIL is quite a lot of new material, so we won't be able to cover everything that is in it. But what we will do in the next 30 minutes is provide you with a brief update of some of the key concepts and models that are part of the ITIL V framework. Before we get started, a couple of the house rules so that you know how we will work in this webinar. First of all, you should note that this session is being recorded. So if you want to review any of the things that we talk about afterwards, you will get the recording sent to you. Second of all, by default, everybody in this webinar has been placed on mute. If you have any questions during this presentation, you can click at the bottom of the left-hand side of the screen, and there you can ask questions. We will do a centralized Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Last but not least, we would kindly like to ask you to provide your feedback on this webinar at the end of this course. You're going to get an automated email which will ask you a couple of questions. So we really appreciate if you could give us 1 minute of your time to provide us with your feedback. We will also ask you what you would like to see in next webinar topics. So if you have availability, please let us know where you would like us to present on next. Your host today is going to be me. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I'm the founder of Cybiant. We're based in Kuala Lumpur. I've done a number of webinars already. Lots of them have been around automation, big data, and IT service management. So in this webinar, I will go through all of the main concepts together with you. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the key concept for today is the new ITIL V framework. We will start with providing you a bit of an introduction to ITIL V and how ITIL V has came to where it is today. Then we will move on to discuss some of the key differences between ITIL 3 and ITIL 4. As most people will know, the ITIL V3 model will be retired in the next 2 years. So it's good to know what the changes are and also how they might impact organizations. Then we will move on to some of the core and key concepts. We will take it one step deeper and discuss some of the main models within the ITIL V framework. The three main models that we're going to discuss today are what we refer to as the service value system, or SVS, the service value chain, and the 4 dimensions of ITIL V. After the content, we will move on to the end of this webinar and discuss some brief information about the ITIL certification scheme. And we've also provided some resources and additional downloads so that you can review and read upon this new developments after the course. At the end, we will do a centralized Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add them into the chat window, and we will cover them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get started with explaining a very brief introduction about what service management is. Service management has been a topic that has been around for almost 3 decades. And it is basically how organizations operate and deal with the delivery and operation of their services. So if we look at the official ITIL definition, we see that service management is a set of specialized organizational capabilities for enabling value to customers in the form of services. And I think this is a very important definition to get it started with. Because why are we all doing this? Why should you be interested in ITIL V? Well, first and foremost, it is in order to deliver value to customers. And what that value is something that we will discuss in the next couple of slides. But that's the very central premise of service management. We do that using a number of organizational capabilities. So obviously, when we're providing IT services, we need to have applications, hardware, knowledge, all combined in order to provide that value. And we will do that in the form of services. So services are intangible, And those are the things that we provide using those organizational capabilities. The next question that, of course, comes to mind is, well, what is then IT service management? Well, obviously, that is service management applied to the domain of IT. So ITIL traditionally has been focused to the domain of IT service management. And this is right away one of the major changes between ITIL V3 and ITIL 4. In ITIL 4, the core focus has become towards more service management in general. So it's not just applicable to IT only, it can be used in a much broader sense and scope. So what do we do with service management? As I just explained in the previous slide, the core objective of service management is to realize value through services. So if you're an organization, whether you're a big bank or an insurance industry, what you would like to do if you're an IT services department or you provide services to your external customer is that you would like to realize value. And because value is a very abstract kind of term, it is really good to realize what you should do in order to realize that value. And that is exactly where ITIL comes in. ITIL provides you with a framework or a state of mind with which you are able to realize that value towards customers. So we will dive into a little bit further on what that exactly looks like and what that is. But for now, I would like you to really think about what are the services that your organization provide and how do they translate into value. And value can be a lot of different things for different people. Obviously, there's monetary value, aspects of things that people want to pay for. But value can also be in the form of social value or intangible value, where people have a nice environment to work or where they are helping the company grow. So different things all add up to providing value to services. And that's exactly what we will do in IT service management, is we will look at how do we provide services that deliver value in the end. So that comes to bear the question in mind. So where does ITIL fit in all of this? If you've been working in service management for a time, you will probably already have encountered the word ITIL a number of times. Why is that the case? Well, ITIL has grown out to become the standard framework for everybody that works in service management. And I sometimes refer to that this is as it's the operating model of the service management industry. ITIL is an abbreviation for the IT Infrastructure Library, and it was originally invented or used by the British government in the early 1980s. So as of today, ITIL is the most widely accepted approach to IT service management in the world. Almost every major company uses ITIL or parts of ITIL in order to deliver services to their customers. So ITIL really helps individuals as well as organizations to realize a business change and make sure that services are delivered that provide value to the end customers. In its essence, ITIL is a set of volumes. So it means that it's published by a publisher and it contains of a set of books. So those books provide the guidance that organizations need to address new services and service management challenges. And what happened with the launch of ITIL 4 is that the owner of the ITIL framework, which is Axelos, published a new set of volumes, which is the updated version of ITIL. So to place that a little bit in perspective and to kind of understand where we are today, it's good to give a little bit of a history lesson. The first version of ITIL was already invented in the 1980s. So it's actually quite an old framework already. It almost consists of more than 40 years. ITIL was originally launched to make a common language between different departments of the government, of the British government. And this is basically how it all started to work. Then in the ITIL, in 2001, the next version of ITIL was launched. And for the people who have been in this industry for a while, you will still remember that as the service support and service delivery model. This is the first version of ITIL that I ever did back in the days. Then another major update was announced in 2007, and this is where we moved towards the ITIL V3, the lifecycle model. And if you've taken any certification in recent years, that will all have been done upon the ITIL lifecycle model. And for the people who are familiar with that, terms like service strategy, service design, transition, operation, continuous service improvement are those phases of the ITIL lifecycle. A small enhancement was made in 2011, but it still kept the ITIL service lifecycle as the main model. And then we launched ITIL 4 in 2019, February to be exact. ITIL 4 is the latest version of ITIL. So that might make you wonder, why has a new version been launched and why was that necessary? Well, in order to understand that, it's good to make a bit of a comparison between ITIL V3 and ITIL 4. Also notice that we're not talking about ITIL V4, it's just ITIL 4 from now onwards. So the version word has been eliminated. It's good to understand that in ITIL V3, the focus was only on IT services. And within ITIL 4, we've moved towards service management in general. Where ITIL V3 had as a central model, and you see this on the screen, the service lifecycle, within ITIL 4, the focus is on the service value system. And I really want you to remember this word because it will be coming back a number of times, and it's also one of the key models that we'll discuss in the upcoming slides. You might wonder, why was this change necessary? Well, it's because IT has evolved. Because in ITIL V3, the main orientation of the framework was around processes. And what that has as a result is a bit of a silo mentality. So within ITIL 4, we've moved on to go towards practices. And I think that's a major and very welcome update that has been needed. Also, one of the major differences is that within ITIL V3, the ITIL model was really a standalone model for IT service management. Whereas in ITIL 4, there's much more focus on the integration of service management with other kinds of practices. So we're talking about the integration with practices like Lean or DevOps or Agile. All of these words and other practices will be coming back in the ITIL 4 model, and they were not present in ITIL version 3. So I think it's a very welcome change, and it's really good for the community that there's this new model available that is a little bit more integrated with other practices that organizations use today. So now that you've had a very brief overview of what is the service value system, because this is the key model that is used in ITIL 4, let's explain a little bit of why this model came to be and what the essential components and activities of the model are. The ITIL service value system is really the core and central model of the new ITIL V4 or ITIL 4 framework. So it's really good to understand this. The core objective of the service value system is to provide value towards customers and stakeholders. And that value is co-created with other stakeholders. So what that means is that it's not just a single organization that does a number of activities in order to deliver value. You need to work together with partners, with suppliers, with your employees, and all other kinds of stakeholders in the organization. So the purpose of the service value system is really to ensure that organizations constantly co-create value with all that stakeholders. And I'm mentioning this deliberately because co-creation is going to be a word that you will see coming back a number of times throughout the ITIL framework. Because of that co-creation and that integration with other providers, each organization's service value system interfaces with other service organizations. And in that way, it forms an ecosystem that turns value for those organizations to their customers and suppliers. In order to do that, we need to have a number of functions, or you could call them practices. So the ITIL service value system describes the inputs to the system and the elements of the system and translates that into how do you deliver value towards your customers. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. On this slide here, you see the central model of the service value system. And you should know that the service value system moves all the way from the left towards the right. So we're moving from opportunity, or frequently abbreviated to demand, all the way to the right, where we provide a value for our customers and stakeholders. And how do we do that? Well, we will move through the ITIL service value system in order to translate demand into valuable services. In the middle, you will see a number of elements which are part of the service value system. First of all, there's the guiding principles, and we will talk about those guiding principles a little bit later. Then we talk about governance, and then the service value chain. The service value chain is also one of the models that we will discuss after this service value system into more detail. Most importantly, after that, there's the practices. So within the new ITIL framework, there's a lot of new practices that are available, and we will cover a couple of those as well. Last but not least, and I think this is very similar to the ITIL V3 framework, we will talk about continual improvement. Notice that it's not longer just continual service improvement, it's just continual improvement in general right now. So this is a very brief overview of the service value system. And one of the key things that I want you to take away from this slide already is that at the center of the service value system is what we refer to as the service value chain. And these are really the activities that an organization needs to take in order to deliver that value. You could also say that the service value chain is really at the heart of the service value system. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at all of the components. The core components of the ITIL service value system consist of these 5 building blocks. First of all, we talked about the guiding principles, which are at the outer ring of the service value system. The guiding principles refer to recommendations or generic conditions that need to be there in order to guide organizations in all kinds of circumstances, regardless of the changes in goals, strategies, types of works, or management structures. I will also say that the guiding principles are kind of the DNA of an organization. It is the values that an organization holds in order to deliver those services to customers. The second key element of the service value system is governance. So this is the way by which an organization is directed and controlled. Governance is frequently explained by direct control and monitor, making sure that you have all those elements in place. So what are the kinds of job roles that you have? And how do you steer your organization on a day-to-day basis? That's all related to the governance domain. Then we move on towards the service value chain. The service value chain are the literally set of activities performed by an organization to deliver valuable products or services. So hold the basic ideas behind that. We will cover the service value chain into way more detail in the next couple of slides. Then we move on towards the practices. And these are the kinds of organizational resources that are designed to perform work or accomplish a particular objective. Within the practices, a lot of the previous processes that were discussed in ITIL 3 are now changed towards practices. So familiar things like incident management, problem management, changes, those are all now considered practices. So this is a major change in between ITIL V3 and ITIL 4. And last but not least, the last key component of the module is continual improvement. And that basically refers to all of the activities that an organization can do in order to make sure that they get better over time, so that the services that they provide become more valuable and that they keep improving over time every single day again and again. So I mentioned already that the service value chain is at the heart of the service value system. So it's the central element. And if we zoom in a little bit further on what the service value chain is, we see that we can subdivide that into a number of different elements. Those elements are the things that you can actually do. So all the way at the left, we start with engage, and we move to plan, design, transition, obtain, build, deliver, and support, and that will result into a number of products and services. So in the end, those products and services are the things that deliver value towards the end customers. So a good example for service would be a particular service desk, which you could call in order to get support that you would like to have. In order to accomplish that, we would need to go through a number of different stages in order to make sure that those services are up and running. And we do that in a very structured and planned approach. And that's what we use the planning element for. After planning, we move towards design and transition. So this is the place where we design the services and transition it to so that it can be used into a live environment. After we've transitioned it into the live environment, we need to make sure that it's being delivered and supported. So this is what we refer to as service operation in the ITIL V3 kind of model. So these are some of the main components of the service value chain. What I want you to remember for now is that the service value chain is really at the heart of the service value system. And it provides all of the activities and steps that you would need in order to bring products and services into the live environment in order to deliver value to customers. So here you see the same picture again with some of the activities and the 6 activities of the value chain a little bit more in detail. So the ITIL service value chain includes 6 key activities that lead to the creation of products and services, which in that turn, as I just explained, return value towards the customer. Also notice that there's a bit of a feedback loop provided on the screen. So value will change and will also provide new inputs towards demand. So in order, the 6 chain activities are planning, making sure that you know what you're going to be doing, improving your products and services over time, and then moving through the 4 steps of engage, design and transition, obtain and build, and deliver and support. So each of these different activities are done in order to provide valuable services to end customers. So the value chain really represents the steps an organization takes in order to create value. Organizations move through the service value chain in order to deliver value. So they will start with planning and they will end at delivering and supporting that service. And I think that this is where there's a lot of integration between the ITIL version 3 and the ITIL version 4. Good. One of the other core models of the new ITIL 4 framework is the 4-dimension model. And basically what that says is, well, if we want to co-create value for customers, we cannot just do that alone. We need to have a number of different elements. We need to consider 4 key dimensions in order to co-create value to our customers. So value, which is delivered by products and services, as we just saw in the service value system and the service value chain, is enclosed by 4 kinds of dimensions. And whether you like it or not, you will need to consider all of these dimensions in order to deliver the products and services in order to deliver value. So you really need to look at this model from the outside towards the inside. So by the 4 dimensions, you're able to provide products and services which will in the end deliver value towards the customers. So let's go through all of these dimensions one by one. First of all, you need to consider the organization and people aspect. And I think this is probably the most important dimension. Service providers will not be able to survive or do not exist without people who are able to steer the organization. So this is a very important aspect that contributes to the services that people provide. Then, of course, there is the second dimension, which is information and technology. And since the ITIL framework has very strong roots in IT service management and IT services in general, information and technology will have a major impact on the services that can be provided. Very good example here, of course, is the technology that's now available with cloud computing. So those kinds of technology developments have a very strong impact on the products and services that can be delivered. And the good news is that technology is always changing. It becomes better over time, and in today's day and age, it will become better much quicker. Thirdly, you need to consider the value streams and processes. So those are the things that we will need to organize within an organization in order to make sure that things get done consistently. So value streams we saw in the service value chain, and also the processes, and here we're talking about the familiar service management processes like incident management, like problem management, and things like change management. So these are the third dimension, and they are bundled together in the value streams and processes section. And then we have, last but not least, the partners and suppliers. Remember that in order to co-create value, you will frequently need to have products and services from external third parties. So those are really the partners and suppliers that you depend upon in order to provide services in your own organization. So what is really good about the new ITIL V model is that it much more looks at the delivery of value by forms of an ecosystem. It looks at all the different components that are necessary in order to translate demand into value. So this is really, I think, a good update and provides a new way of thinking in order to update the ideas behind service management. So in order to summarize this a little bit, we looked at the 4 dimensions that are required in order to deliver those products and services in order to deliver value. So in order to achieve the desired outcome of services and to work as effectively as possible, really organizations should consider all these aspects in their behavior. It's really not possible to deliver any kind of service without any of these 4 aspects. If you don't have a good regard for your organization and people, you won't be able to deliver good products and services. The same is true for your partners or processes or technology. So really what the 4-dimension model is all about is that it's providing a holistic approach to service management. And the word holistic means taking all things in consideration. So really ITIL, what they try to do is to consider all of the things that are necessary to provide value to customers and provide that in the form of products and services. And those 4 dimensions all work together. So you really need to think about all of them on a day-to-day basis. So what we've just done is that we move through the 3, I would say, most important elements of the new ITIL V model. And one of the things that has also changed, and this is not necessarily a model, but more of an explanation of certification, because it's almost impossible to mention ITIL without talking about the certification scheme. Most people start to learn about ITIL by going on a course and exploring and sitting for an exam in order to get certified in a particular area. And this is the last kind of key overview of the new ITIL V model. And that is a certification scheme. So what that means is that these are the courses and the particular certifications that you can take. So this model is also very much different than the previous ITIL V model. And now I'll walk you through it very, very briefly. Basically, how the new ITIL V model is built up is that there's 4 levels of certification, or you could say 4 even designations. At the bottom of the slide, you will see ITIL Foundation, and I think this is still the most commonly used course that is out there, and that will get you familiar with the basic concepts of ITIL and the new ITIL framework. So whereas we had ITIL version 3 Foundation in the previous version, we now have ITIL 4 Foundation, which is again the entry level and the certificate that you require for any additional follow-up course. After that, there's 2 kinds of designations that you can get. First, you can get the ITIL Managing Professional designation, or on the right-hand side, you see the ITIL Strategic Leader designation. And let's start with the ITIL Managing Professional designation. In order to achieve that, after you've done the ITIL Foundation, there's 4 different courses that you would need to take. And 3 of those are called the Specialist courses, and 1 of them is the Strategist course. The names of the courses are Create, Deliver, Support, Drive Stakeholder Value, and High Velocity IT, as you can see on the slide. If you've passed all of those 4 modules, you will get the designation and certificate for ITIL Managing Professional. On the right-hand side, you see another kind of designation, and that's the one for Strategic Leader. And if you look closely at the picture, you see that 2 modules are in common between the ITIL MP certification and the ITIL SL certification. And that's the ITIL Strategist module. So it doesn't mean that you need to take them twice. You just need to take one other module within ITIL Strategic Leader in order to also get that particular designation. Last but not least, the fourth level, which was also technically prevalent in ITIL V3, is the ITIL Master. And that's really the specialist. A more in-depth case study of how you use ITIL practices and principles in day-to-day use. So that's the final level that you can go through. I hope this helps to explain a little bit on how the new ITIL framework certification looks like and what are the basic ideas behind it. So in order to summarize this webinar, because we're almost through half an hour already, time really flies, is what we try to provide to you today is to give you a basic idea of what service management is, and especially how ITIL 4 fits as a best practice framework into service management as a model. After that, we looked at 3 of the key new models which have been introduced within the ITIL 4 overview. We looked at the service value system, the service value chain, and the 4 dimensions model. Obviously, we looked at all of those models at a very high level today because in this webinar, we don't have the time to dive into those in depth. But it's good to know that they exist, and it's good to know the basic ideas and components behind each and every one of them. And then the last thing that we did in this webinar is discuss how the new ITIL 4 certification model works, and we looked at the different levels that you can achieve with the new ITIL 4 certification scheme. So those are the things that we did in this webinar today. If you would like to learn more about ITIL 4, we've provided you with some very useful resources and downloads. So there's 2 main articles which you can look up on the website, and they provide you with some essential knowledge about the ITIL 4 update. The first one is the article which says all you need to know about the ITIL 4 update. Basically, this is an in-depth article that discusses the 3 models that we've just seen into further detail. So here you will see the core components, and I really recommend you to go and visit this link in order to learn a little bit more about the ITIL 4 update. The second key resource that we made available is the Ultimate ITIL 4 Frequently Asked Questions. Obviously, with the introduction of a new framework, there's always lots of questions. What does it mean for my certification? How can I move to a next one? How does it affect my tools and the processes that we've implemented in our own organization? What we've tried to do is come up with an ultimate ITIL 4 frequently asked questions. And what this does is that it provides a Q&A towards some of the most commonly asked questions. And I think there's almost all 30 questions and answers there. So it's really quite comprehensive. So if you have any questions there, I also highly recommend you to go and visit that webpage as well. If you would be interested to go into more depth, we also provide some training courses. Training courses that are up and coming include the ones which are in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. So on 23-24 April, we host the next session in Kuala Lumpur, and on 12 to 13 May, we host the next session in Singapore. So if you're interested to get a bit more detailed overview of the ITIL 4 framework, I highly recommend you to go and visit that particular course. If you're already an ITIL expert and would like to transition to ITIL Managing Professional right away, we also provide the ITIL Managing Professional transition module, which are on 13 and 17 April, 2 sessions, both scheduled in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. The good news is that the exam provider, PeopleCert, has now provided a 30% exam discount until the end of June. So I really would recommend that you take up that offer because it saves you quite a lot of money in terms of the examination. So those are some of the marketing slides that I ended with, that provide you with a bit of an overview of how you can transition by yourself. I think now might be a good time to answer some of the questions that people have in the webinar. Good. One of the first questions that I see is, can I transition from ITIL 3 Foundation towards ITIL 4 Foundation? The answer is no. There's no bridge between ITIL V3 on a foundation level and ITIL 4. So you really need to then retake the ITIL 4 certification level. Another question is, do processes such as incident and change management change within ITIL 4, and do I need to reconfigure my tools? The answer to that is no. The practices of incident management and change management are still included within the ITIL 4 framework, and people can, and they are now just called practices and not processes anymore, but they're still there. So there's no need to completely reorganize your tools and your technology as well. Good. Other question that came in. I've done one intermediate module service design. Can I now transition to ITIL 4? The answer is no. There's only one way to move from ITIL 3 towards ITIL 4, and that is by doing the Managing Professional Transition module. And the entry requirements for the ITIL Managing Professional Transition module is that you're either an ITIL expert in V3, or you have 17 ITIL credits collected in ITIL V3 points. So if you've just done the service design, you don't have those 17 credits yet. If you would like to learn more about how that credit system works, I highly recommend that you will go to the website and visit the frequently asked questions. There you will find a very detailed explanation on how you can transition between the two. Another question that comes in, will ISO 20000 also change with the new version of ITIL? The answer to that is ITIL or ISO 20000 is the standard for service management. So that standard has not been updated yet to reflect the new version of ITIL. So that standard still remains valid. It's highly likely that the new version of the standard will have elements of the new ITIL 4 framework in it, but ISO 20000 certification still remains valid as it has always been in previous years. So that's not gonna change anytime soon. Good. If I look at it, I think we're through the questions. And that brings us to the end of this webinar today. After this webinar, you will get the recording, and we will be able to provide you with an overview of the different Q&A sessions, so you can watch them again and download all the materials. Thank you so much for watching again today, and we hope to see you on any of the upcoming new webinars. Thank you so much.